Hey mate, 40 here. I came all this way for one reason and one reason only, and that is to play for you tonight this ode to Roe v. Wade. Woo! Okay, I don't have strong opinions on abortion, but I do know some otherwise very nice women who, after having an abortion, throw a party. Right? That seems to me perverse. There's another woman I dated who said she'd never had an abortion, but her attitude was, abortion is just something every woman goes through. So, I guess I'm legally pro-choice and morally pro-life. I think in 99% of occasions, having an abortion is an immoral thing to do. But I'm not sure I want to make it illegal for the first trimester anyway. On the other hand, I'm not radically for making it illegal. I'm not radically for keeping it legal. I don't really have any strong opinions on it. That makes me just a terrible live streamer. I have really strong opinions on almost nothing. It is a classic case of liberalism versus democracy. So the way our elites speak to us, the way the news media speak to us, it's that democracy and liberalism, they're just like ham and eggs. Well, liberalism is about our rights, right? Sustaining our rights. And I noticed all this talk about right to an abortion. So almost all the rights talk with regard to abortion, it's about the right of women to have abortions. And almost none of it is about the right of the unborn to live. You would think that if you want to talk rights with regard to abortion, that maybe the right of the unborn to live. So this is if this becomes the final ruling, it is a triumph for democracy, right? If you are pro-democracy, then you will like this ruling, because this ruling overturning Roe v. Wade will make abortion something that politicians decide. Meaning that voters decide. People get to vote on whether or not you have a right to just unlimited amounts of abortion, at least for the first 3 months. So if you're pro-democracy and that's your overwhelming value, democracy, then you have to like this putative ruling. I am not overwhelmingly pro-democracy. I am moderately pro-democracy. So sometimes I think experts know best. Sometimes I am all for delegating these things to experts, but not in this case, not on this red button moral issue. I'm not saying, oh, we should just delegate this to the judges and they've already decided and it's a right. So.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. First up, polls have just closed in the Ohio Senate primary. One state, one primary early in the season, and yet the results could determine what the Republican Party looks like going forward. So we're going to follow those for you and bring you any updates we have. But first tonight, if you listen carefully to leaders of the Democratic Party, and we do, you would think America was built on a single court decision from 1973. The very same people who consider the Bill of Rights a racist relic and quickly dismiss it out of hand, those same people quickly become emotional as they describe the sublime beauty of Roe versus Wade. Yesterday, one Democratic office holder described the Roe decision as, quote, sacred. And it's not an overstatement. For many Democrats, it is sacred. They will tell you, and they mean it, that this country cannot continue without Roe. Without Roe, darkness will descend. America will revert to slavery and cannibalism and other varieties of Hobbesian misery so gruesome they're best left undescribed.
So I recently read the 4-part series the New York Times produced this weekend on Tucker Carlson. They note that his monologues have gotten longer and longer and longer. So back in 2017, when he first started out with a daily Fox News show, his monologues were short, if there were any at all, and he engaged much more with liberals. But minute-by-minute ratings analyses showed that people preferred to hear from Tucker directly and to hear from other people on the right. So his monologues have gotten longer and longer and longer, become an increasingly large part of the show, and I think for good reason. All right, many of the debates with liberals, with the very limited amount of time that you have to debate on cable TV, they were just pro forma, people going through the motions. So I think delivering impassioned monologues is something that Tucker does really well.
Between a bright new tomorrow and the hell of the Handmaid's Tale stands only Roe v. Wade. They're telling you that on channels right now across the spectrum. It's all pretty bewildering if you consider what Roe v. Wade actually is. And that is true no matter what you think of abortion itself, whether you're strongly for legal abortion. The decision, as a decision, Roe v. Wade, is a widely acknowledged joke. Moral questions aside, Roe is the most embarrassing court decision handed down in the last century. Every part of it, from its invented constitutional justification to its meaningless parameters, mocks the idea of sober jurisprudence. The point of the Supreme Court is to interpret the Constitution. Abortion is not mentioned or alluded to in the Constitution. Roe was invented whole cloth. And if you don't believe it, reread it 49 years later. Go ahead and try it. It'll make you blush. The Roe decision turns out to be a period piece from the early 70s, like Sideburns or the AMC Gremlin. It's the triumph of faddish political trends over the law. So the fact that the Roe decision was in fact shoddy and shameful is hardly a partisan opinion. In fact, plenty of Democrats, including a lot of ardent pro-choicers, have acknowledged that over the years because it's true. And that would include, by the way, Joe Biden. Joe Biden has always supported legal abortion. But 9 years after the Roe decision...
So this touches on an important issue. What's more important to you? Philosophical principles, highfalutin legal principles? Are you more interested in principles or in your interests? So if your interests are pro-abortion, then you're going to like the effects of Roe v. Wade, and you're going to like Roe v. Wade even if it's shoddy law. If you are opposed to the effects of Roe v. Wade, you're going to oppose it even if it were stellar law. So one way that my thinking has developed over the past 7 years is increasing shift to the importance of interests over principles. So sometimes principles are more important than interests, but generally speaking, as I converted to Orthodox Judaism, began to see life more from a tribal perspective, and therefore develop more empathy for other people who see life primarily from a tribal perspective, yeah, most of the time it makes more sense to look at the world through the lens of your interests rather than through the lens of abstract principles. So looking at the world through the lens of abstract principles is more something that Anglos do, who are about the only people in the world who see things in terms of universal morality. So pretty much everyone else employs in-group versus out-group morality. So there's one morality for how they treat their in-group, and then how you treat out-groups doesn't matter much. That's the way of the world, with the exception of Anglos.
Decision was handed down, he was still willing to admit it was indefensible as a legal decision. Pregnant women, Biden explained in 1982 as a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, should not have, quote, the sole right to say what should happen to their unborn children because, after all, no one creates children alone. It takes two people. That's obvious. In fact, Biden concluded, Roe had gone, quote, too far. And of course, it had gone too far. That was obvious then, it's obvious now. Then, as now, many Americans believe that abortion is murder. Many other Americans consider abortion a prerequisite to happiness. Now, those are unreconcilable positions. But thankfully, in a democracy, we have a solution to quandaries like this, and it's called voting. If we don't like something...
Okay, breaking news. Apparently, Ethan Ralph, live streamer, was detained while live streaming at the U.S. Supreme Court.
Well, I haven't broken any laws, that's what I'm saying. We don't know that yet. Well,
Oh.
what were they told? What were
They're
told?
detaining me, and they don't know
Is there
yet.
anything on you, sir, that we need to be worried about?
No.
There's nothing on you at all?
No.
You're telling me the truth?
Yes.
Okay.
Take this. You're taking that? I didn't turn that off. The cops turned that off, by the way.
What do you want?
Okay.
something in America, if you want to change it, we elect representatives to act on our behalf. If they do what we ask them to do, we re-elect them. That's the reward. If they don't, we vote them out. That's the punishment. That's how our system works. For hundreds of years, we have used that system to resolve plenty of complex and thorny moral issues. Not just abortion, many others, and it has worked well. And that's why this has always been a stable country, because we get to rule ourselves. Roe versus Wade took that right away. In a single 1973 decision, the High Court banned democracy from the debate over abortion. Justices prohibited the states from enacting abortion restrictions that their own citizens strongly preferred. That meant that going forward, Alabama would be required to have the same abortion laws as Massachusetts. Now, some people loved this. Of course, people in Massachusetts loved it. People in Alabama hated it. But there was nothing anybody could do about it because the Supreme Court had cut voters out of the equation. And as a result of that, the issue of abortion was never resolved. Things are not resolved by fiat. They're only resolved by consent. That's the core idea in democracy, and it's true. So as a result of this short-circuiting of democracy, demands from the left forced it. As a result of that, for nearly 50 years, this issue has festered. It has given Americans yet another reason to dislike each other. It has divided the country. And now, finally, after 49 years, voters might have their rightful say over what to do about abortion, as is their right. According to a piece last night in the blog Politico, the majority of justices on the Supreme Court are ready to overturn Roe. Justice Alito said so very clearly in a draft opinion that you can read yourself because it's circulating on the internet. Now, we shouldn't be able to read that draft opinion. It's not for public consumption. A final official decision on Roe is supposed to be months away. And yet, an unnamed liberal operative short-circuited this ancient process, which has worked well for hundreds of years. This person leaked the opinion, and not by accident. The point of leaking the opinion was to intimidate conservative justices into reversing course. Mob justice. Now, if you're shocked by that, you shouldn't be. Remember that it's not so different from what we saw this January, when another unnamed liberal operative leaked the news that Justice Stephen Breyer was planning on retiring. And that news forced Stephen Breyer to retire, which liberal operatives wanted him to do because he was a white man. So that was, in other words, another op, one of many we're now seeing in our country. And as if to prove that, within moments of this story breaking last night, a mob formed a flash mob at the Supreme Court. Watch.
Fascist scum has got to go. Ho, ho. Hey, hey.
Well, the upside is they're not telling you it's your body, your choice. Even these people couldn't pull that off with a straight face after forcing millions of Americans to inject an experimental drug against their will or be fired. Do you remember that? So they can't claim you have bodily autonomy anymore because you demonstrably don't. So instead they move to name-calling. You're a fascist if you
So 12 hours ago, Ben Shapiro tweeted, "I'm sorry the Constitution is happening to you."
disagree with them. And they've been honing those talking points because they've been preparing for this moment for quite some time. The Supreme Court, everyone knows, is currently debating the constitutionality of a Mississippi law that...
Okay, so people want to know, how are abortion fights a proxy for race? This is a topic covered in the New York Times back in September of 2021. Topic I covered on my show about 6 months ago. Why is abortion such a divisive topic in the United States when it's not nearly as intense in Europe or in Australia? Because abortion fights are not really about abortion. Abortion was a way to rally Protestants, Catholics, and trads, right? Natural supporters of the Republican Party. This was a cause that we denied all these disparate elements of the Republican Party. So starting in the 1970s, conservative activists saw they weren't going to be able to unite these groups around, oh, we need to retain IRS tax breaks for racially discriminatory private schools. But abortion, you take this issue, you sacralize it, and you make it a proxy essentially for race. It's a proxy for traditional attitudes. It's an issue that attracts support from many constituencies who would not otherwise necessarily vote Republican. So it's a way of bringing these various groups into the Republican Party. And essentially most of these groups are dominantly white. So it's abortion fights, fighting against the right to an abortion, essentially become a proxy fight for standing up for your tribe, your white tribe. So almost all proxy fights are tribal and racial at their core. So Northern Ireland is not really Protestant versus Roman Catholic. It's a tribal fight. And Jews versus Muslims in the Middle East, it's not primarily about religion, it's a tribal fight. So when you get down to it, things become tribal. That's usually the bottom line for most human conflicts between in-groups and out-groups.
Bans abortion after 15 weeks. Now, during oral arguments in this case in December, Justice Alito noted that, quote, the fetus has an interest in having a life. Now, that's true. But when he said that, plans for retaliation began. No one wanted Sam Alito to vote the wrong way. And now those plans are underway. And it's no exaggeration to say that once this stuff gets going, you don't know where it winds up. People could get hurt because of this leak. You'd hate to think that could happen, and you'd hate even more to think anyone wanted that to happen. But people do, and here they are. Ada Chavez works for The Nation. She's some kind of reporter. She just tweeted that it's, quote, good that conservative justices and their families will, quote, have their lives threatened. She's in favor of that. Over at Vox.com, Ian Millhiser added, quote, seriously, shout out to whoever the hero was within the Supreme Court who said, F it, let's burn this place down. Oh, we don't get what we want? We'll just burn it down. Government by tantrum. You've seen that before. Brian Fallon, the executive director of the thoroughly thuggish activist group Demand Justice, or else, which is implied, said this, quote, is a brave clerk taking this unprecedented step of leaking a draft opinion to warn the country what's coming in a last-ditch Hail Mary to see if the public response might cause the court to consider? Oh, the public response, like do what we want or we'll hurt you? Again, we've seen that before. Let's stop pretending. These are threats of violence, obviously. The CEO of Planned Parenthood is now calling on activists to storm state Capitol buildings. Watch this.
We know that this decision is going to enrage people. We know, we've already seen what's happened when people find out when they found out what was happening in Texas, they started filling state houses in Florida. They started filling state houses in other places because they know that the fight right now is on the ground and in these states. And so we are going to continue to capture that rage.
Oh, we're going to capture that rage. People get angry, and you wouldn't like us when we're angry. Well, didn't we have a system? Didn't we have democratic norms we were supposed to?
I remember this nice liberal lady, a friend of mine, just a wonderful person, but she said there's no way we're going to allow Trump to be reelected in 2020. We'll go out and we'll bomb this country if necessary. We will do anything to stop Trump's reelection.
To observe, if you don't like something, isn't there a process for resolving that? Don't you elect people to see your will put into law? Not anymore. You just storm capitals. But wait a second, says the attuned television viewer. Isn't storming capitals to thwart democracy and insurrection? Oh, no. Only under certain circumstances, not when the abortion people do it, not when they announce their plans on CNN. When that happens, it's a good thing. Already, the leaders of the Democratic Party are vowing to use this draft decision as a pretext to eliminate the filibuster and pack the Supreme Court. Now, here's the best part. All of this is happening in the name of democracy, so that you will never have a chance to vote on something that matters to you, like abortion. And by the way, it matters to you whether you're for it or against it. But so that you won't have a chance to ever vote on something like that, they're going to thwart democracy. Here's a former U.S. attorney explaining that the conservative justices on the Supreme Court are, in fact, insurrectionists.
I think it's not too great a stretch to say there is some connection between an effort to overturn an election and an effort to overturn Roe. And it's this, as I've been thinking about it. There is a segment of the ideological spectrum now who thinks it has certain kinds of powers and wants to engage in radical efforts to overturn things that they don't like. There's no more incrementalism. There's no more compromise. You don't like the results of an election, you storm the Capitol, and you talk about hanging the Vice President of the United States, and you get the presidency back.
Yeah, it's like overturning an election. I mean, you listen to something like that, and there are like 9 points you could make in response. Then you have to ask, either the person saying that is so stupid that he doesn't understand what he's saying, or he's willing to say absolutely anything to stop the other side. And that's, of course, what you're watching. These people aren't stupid, they're just dishonest. Now, the thread, the consistent note in all of these clips is that none of the people yammering about this draft opinion, written by Sam Alito, have actually read it. And you know that because they don't even attempt to respond to the legal arguments, because legal arguments are immaterial, just as they...
Okay, this is Tucker Carlson at his best. So the place that I turned to seek commentary on this matter is I went to Steve Saylor's comment section. So here are some of the most interesting comments I found there. One thing here from the chat: New York City subway shooter said that Planned Parenthood was a way to de-life millions of single mother blacks. It was a Holocaust. And a lot of my right-wing friends says this is a gift to the left. They really needed that boost of energy. Here's some of the comments on Steve Saylor. If there is any chance at all that this could once again make people serious about sex and human relationships, it won't be a bad thing. How many human lives will it save? Probably not many. Downside is it weaponizes the abortion issue at a time when Democratic prospects otherwise are looking bad, gives them something to campaign on that may win them some votes. So who exactly is going to change their vote to Democrat because of this? The upside is that it makes people aware that the only thing Democrats have going for them is that they're in favor of people letting people murder unborn children. Rejoinder, look up the statistics of people who have abortions. They're not the kinds of people we want breeding. Gosh, got to disavow. Didn't the New York Times say that 70% of women who have abortions are women of color? The U.S. Justice who wrote this is perfectly correct, saying the U.S. Constitution does not grant the right to abortion. It never occurred to our founding fathers to think of such a thing. Now, we could vote for a constitutional amendment granting the right to abortion. That could settle the issue. In the short term, if abortion disappears, more unwed women are going to end up on welfare. So this will be a financial burden on blue states that they can't afford. So it will spike the number of babies given to adoption agencies, create a large generation of unwanted children who are psychologically messed up and probably criminally inclined. So it may well be a social disaster. Abortion is the holiest sacrament in the progressive religion, since it frees women up to work and have sex lives like men. Middle-income women will become a lot more discriminating in who they hook up with. Yeah, I'm going to be much more careful about how I conduct myself on Tinder now. Right now, they're quite discriminating about social status and height. Now they need to think about, is the guy going to stick around? Biggest winners out of all this, dorky Asian men. So does life begin at conception? So every time a couple of gametes bump into each other, something sacred is being created. Since most pregnancies end in natural abortion early on, does this mean God is the ultimate murderer? Speculation at Powerline is this leak came from one of the most left-wing justices, probably Sotomayor, who is by far the dumbest and most political of the 9 justices, because any law clerk leaking an opinion would be kissing his legal career goodbye. So this will likely cause great contention between the right and left. It could solidify divisions on the U.S. Supreme Court and make conservative justice, including Chief Justice Roberts, even less likely to work with the liberal ones. So the liberal justices may have lost their swing vote in Roberts. Will certainly spike the number of babies given up to adoption agencies. If you talk to any couples who are trying to adopt, trying to find a white American baby without any birth defects is like finding a needle in the haystack. And very few Jewish women give up in America, give up children for abortion. So Intelligent Dyson comments on Steve Saylor's blog, this is epochal. The portent of this news will not be grasped for a long time, but future generations will look back on today as the day when sanity began returning to the West. The progressive agenda is being undone by reality. As a result of this ruling, we'll have stronger families, saner women, economic parity between capital and labor, less politicization of medicine. The leak will only end up severely hurting the Democrats and the left. The leaker will be discovered. If it turns out that a justice was involved, that justice will be impeached and removed to protect the integrity of the court. The left miscalculated badly with this one. It's strange how all the armchair legal scholars are yowling this will throw the November election to the Democrats. Majority of the American electorate is pro-life. Yeah, but about 70% of the electorate supports some limited access to abortion. So even though Trump failed to deliver on most of his promises, number one, he was great on immigration. And the one promise he did particularly deliver on was the Supreme Court, and is about to start paying off in spades. So who is the most likely clerk to leak this? And Justice Sotomayor has a clerk named Amit Jain. So this is the Supreme Court clerk who allegedly turned over that brief. Let's have a look here. So Josh Gerstein has cited him in the past. So this is the guy who very likely turned over this brief. He's an attorney in Brooklyn. His whole career has been left-wing projects. People overestimate both abortion's popularity and its reach as a galvanizing issue on the electorate. Well, how will forcing the stripper to have a kid out of wedlock strengthen your family or my family? Is the stripper going to magically transform herself into a trad wife once blessed with a pregnancy she doesn't want? No one is going to be more likely to view sex as a potent procreative force if abortion is restricted in their state. Most white women who want abortions will spend a few $100s extra and travel to a state where abortion is legal and get one. The ones who don't will be the most stupid and drug-addicted ones. The amount of unwanted offspring aborted vastly outnumbers the amount of children that come here through illegal immigration. What is the sense of opposing the latter while restricting abortion? Oh, right, sex is supposed to be special. So how many voters are really so gung-ho on killing babies that they care more about that than the soaring prices of everything, child grooming agenda, and race war hangover? Right, a fair number, but they are the ones who tend to vote Democrat anyway. So some of the sharpest opinions on the Steve Saylor blog.
They were when the 7 justices in 1973 produced Roe v. Wade. They didn't even consider really what the Constitution had to say about it because they didn't care. That's why it's an embarrassing decision. So instead of assessing what Alito wrote, they just accuse him of terrorism. Overturning precedent is an act of insurrection, says the federal prosecutor on TV. Really? So any Supreme Court decision must remain in place.
Bell says Bill Gates' mom's main charity was Planned Parenthood. Bill Gates supports it too. So Bill Gates says overpopulation, we have 3 solutions: education, vaccines, and medical procedures. Okay, meaning abortion.
Forever, or else you're committing an act of insurrection. Legal scholars out there, are there any Supreme Court decisions through the ages that were overturned and that we're happy were overturned? Yeah, probably quite a few. Plessy versus Ferguson, anyone? But it doesn't matter. The legal experts are screaming about fascism. They're telling you it's only a matter of time before the Supreme Court brings back segregation, if not slavery. Watch.
This is just the beginning. Next, they'll go after gay marriage and maybe the board, what is it, Brown versus Board of Education? Yeah. They already eroded our voting rights.
Oh my God. We may return power to local communities to decide what kind of schools they want to have, whether people want to have gay marriage or not. So she's arguing that this decision might restore more democracy to America, and that's a bad thing.
A little bit. So I see fascism down the line here.
Wow, more democracy equals fascism down the line.
Fascism down the line. You know, it's almost, it almost detracts from us to play you something like that. But that show has real ratings. People listen to someone like that who literally couldn't navigate it. A checkout scanner telling you what the Supreme Court draft opinion might mean, despite the fact she's totally capable of reading it or anything else longer than a tweet. Whatever. She clearly didn't read what Alito wrote. Alito did actually, by the way, anticipate this argument that if you do this, all kinds of other terrible things are going to happen. He said it right out loud. Here's what he wrote for all the people who will never read it, and we're quoting. What is distinctive about abortion, wrote Alito, is its effect on what Roe termed potential life. Abortion is what he said is a unique issue. Quote, to ensure that our decision is not misunderstood or mischaracterized, comma, we emphasize that our decision concerns the constitutional right to abortion and no other right. Oh, so they're not trying to bring back slavery or legalize cannibalism or make it illegal for you to vote. What they're trying to do is allow you to vote on abortion. That's how dishonest these people are. If Roe v. Wade goes away, you get to vote on abortion. And if you're a pro-lifer, that's good news. If you're a pro-choice activist, that's a good news. Why wouldn't you want your democracy to function? You don't want to vote on it? You want some elderly person to tell you what to do? No, it's a democracy. You vote. But no one on television is saying that. Instead, they're demagoguing. In their hysteria, in fact, they're nullifying all the gender rules they've just concocted, which is gratifying to watch. They don't realize it, but it's fun to see it. At CNN, for example, which spent all last year telling you that men can get pregnant. Oh, yes, they can. Suddenly, they rediscovered the meaning of the word woman.
Well, forgive me, I seem to be losing my voice, so you'll hear me a little bit differently, but it seems to be in line with how women are losing their rights in this country. This opinion can be, if true, narrowed down and defined quite simply. Women are not viewed as equal to men.
Well, women are far more hostile to abortion than men are. So much for that way of thinking. All right, let's have a look at this great Thomas Edsall column in the New York Times back on September 15th, 2021. So opinions on abortion are essentially a proxy for racial attitudes. Whites who score high on measures of racial resentment and racial grievance far more likely to support strict limits on abortion than whites who score low on those measures. Right, this is part of a larger picture in which racial attitudes are increasingly linked with opinions on a wide range of disparate issues, including social welfare, gun control, immigration, and climate change. So these issues are closely interconnected with racial attitudes, and this is a key factor in the deep polarization within the electorate. So abortion wasn't always this huge role in American politics. What happened is that key leaders of the conservative movement late 1970s and early 1980s, such as Richard Viguerie, Paul Weyrich, Phyllis Schlafly, Jerry Falwell, wanted to expand their base beyond those opposed to the civil rights movement, all right? And conservative strategists settled on a concerted effort to politicize abortion because it dodged the race issue and it offered the opportunity to unify conservative Catholics and evangelicals. So the anti-abortion movement has been remarkably successful at convincing observers that the positions individuals take on the abortion issue always follow in a deductive way from their moral principles. They don't. So in 1978, the hostile reaction to an IRS proposal to impose taxes on churches running segregated private schools, meaning children of white Southerners seeking to avoid federally mandated school integration orders. And we also, with busing in the 1970s, we suddenly had the first time an explosion in Los Angeles of Jewish schools. And a lot of Jewish centrist and center-right politicians came out of that movement. So conservatives have a hostile reaction to the IRS wanting to take away tax deductions on racially segregated private schools. So they tried to mobilize, and evangelical parishioners thought through the creation of the moral majority, they would find an issue with abortion that could bring together a much larger constituency. So building a new movement around the burning issue of defending the tax advantages of racially segregated schools was not going to be a viable strategy on the national stage. So stop the taxes on segregation just wasn't going to inspire the kind of broad-based conservative counter-revolution that they envisioned. So after a long and contentious debate, conservative strategists came to a consensus. They landed upon the one surprising word that would supply the key to the political puzzle of the age: abortion. So abortion opponents, much more likely to be committed to a patriarchal worldview, in which the control of reproduction and female sexuality is thought to be central in maintaining a hierarchy that sustains the family, which is under threat from secular modern forces. And even though this is all coming from a left-wing secular perspective, I think they're absolutely right. So Judaism's opposed to abortion. Judaism, generally speaking, traditional Judaism definitely regards abortion as killing, but most rabbis have not regarded it as murder. So not all forms of killing are murder. So killing is taking a life, murder is immoral killing. And there are moral gradations to killing. So it wasn't always such a big deal in American politics. 50 years ago, the Southern Baptist Convention adopted a liberal resolution on abortion, but that changed. So there was a 1990 meeting of conservatives in Washington at which conservative activist Paul Weyrich spoke. He said the religious right did not come together in response to the Roe decision. No, what got the movement going as a political movement was the attempt on the part of the Internal Revenue Service to rescind the tax-exempt status of Bob Jones University because of its racially discriminatory policies, including a ban on interracial dating the university maintained until 2000. So I went to an evangelical Christian school, Forest Lake Christian Academy, and they really got behind sending people to Forest Lake, to Bob Jones University. So most people who went to Forest Lake Christian were politically conservative, and going to Bob Jones was kind of the thing to do. So opposition to abortion became a convenient diversion. It became a godsend to distract from what motivated this political activism, meaning the defense of racial segregation in Christian institutions. So politicians who have become adamant foes of abortion, right? When open racism is unfashionable, or when speaking honestly about race is unfashionable, these politicians needed a more high-minded issue, one that would not compel them to surrender their fundamental political orientation. So the beauty of defending a fetus is that the fetus demands nothing in return. It's fairly low risk advocacy. So 1970s America, you had all these surging rights movements, rights for African Americans, women's rights, reproductive rights, gay rights, rights for criminal defendants and the mentally ill. And this set the stage for the explosive conservative reaction. So there is this persistent association between abortion views and ethno-racial exclusion. So being anti-choice or holding exclusionary beliefs is a clear marker of Republican affiliation. Being pro-choice or defining America in racially inclusive terms signals democratic identity. And you see the same thing on a wide range of other issues, from healthcare, voting rights, to mask wearing and vaccination during COVID. So for the target population, particularly evangelical Protestants and conservatively inclined Catholics, who these conservative activists are trying to mobilize, racial animosity and abortion attitudes are related in an indirect way, but through an aversion to intellectual elites. So the people perceived to be pushing the government's role in equal opportunity and racial integration, now the same as those pushing permissive abortion laws, meaning the highly educated from New England, from banking, universities, northern cities, and elsewhere. So the policy domain may differ, but the hated people are the same. So instead of religiosity driving political attitudes, the shifting political landscape in which Republicans have become associated with religious values and cultural conservatism has changed partisans' involvement with their religious communities. So some people go to a traditional religious community in large part because that's where they can socialize with other people who are right-wing. If you want to raise a family and have kids and live a monogamous life, the easiest way to do that is to integrate yourself into a religious community. If you just want to screw around, you will most likely become secular. So Republicans and Democrats select into or out of religious communities in large part based on what kind of sex life they want and what kind of community they want to live in politically. So once you select in or out of a traditional religious group, you then find yourself essentially politically homogeneous social network where you encounter less diverse political information. So churches and synagogues, less and less places where people with different political viewpoints come together. Religious communities become more like echo chambers populated by like-minded partisans.
Women are losing their rights, really. What percentage of college students at elite colleges are women? What percentage of first hires at big companies are women? Yeah, women are losing their rights. How many elections are determined by women? Let's see all of them. Liars, stupid people. And in fact, just to get back to the Constitution, which is the core question here, abortion does not appear there, nor has there ever been a right to abortion in this country. Now, if that bothers you, if you want a right to abortion, you can vote for it in the Congress. You could pass a constitutional amendment. If you actually supported democracy, that's what you would do or call for your representatives to do, but so far nobody has. And in fact, we're moving in the other direction. Today, Joe Biden announced that democracy has been suspended.
One of the reasons why I voted against a number of the members in the court, they refused to acknowledge that there's a Ninth Amendment. They refused to acknowledge there's a right to privacy. I mean, there's so many fundamental rights that are affected by that. And I'm not prepared to leave that to the whims of the public at the moment.
I can't remember the word, but we're going to piece together the sentence, and we're quoting, "The whims of the public no longer matter." Sorry, pal, they do matter. It's a democracy. Our whims matter. So do our beliefs. We get to vote on this stuff because that's our system. You're just passing through. You'll be gone soon. The rest of us get to decide how we're governed because we're a self-governing country. We're free people. Sorry. There's a lot to unpack here, and so we thought we would start with an actual lawyer, someone who knows a lot about the Supreme Court, our friend Laura Ingraham, the host of the Ingraham Angle.
Yeah, just wondering what Laura Ingraham has to say. I'm absolutely fascinated. All right. Instead, let's tune in to podcast from September 12, Cruel to Be Kind, the case for abortion, Ed Dutton and Richard Spencer.
Evolution does not necessarily reward intelligence. With no natural predators to thin the herd, it began to simply reward those who reproduced the most and left the intelligent to become an endangered species.
Having kids is such an important decision.
We're just waiting for the right time. It's not something you want to rush into, obviously.
No way.
Oh shit, I'm pregnant again!
Shit! I got too many damn kids! Thought you was on the pill or some shit!
Hell no!
Must have been thinking of Brittany.
Brittany? No, you didn't! There's no way we could have a child now. Not with the market the way it is, no.
God, no. That just wouldn't make any sense.
Come on over here, bitch! He don't care about you!
Yeah, well, there must be something he likes over here.
You mean nothing to me, baby? Oh, shit. It wasn't me! It wasn't me!
Well, we finally decided to have children, and I'm not pointing fingers, but it's not going well.
And this is helping.
I'm just saying that before I have in vitro, maybe you should be willing to...
It's always me, right?
Well, it's not my sperm count.
Yeah! I'm gonna fuck all y'all! That's my boy!
Cleavon is lucky to be alive. He attempted to jump a jet ski from a lake into a swimming pool and impaled his crotch on an iron gate. But thanks to recent advances in stem cell research and the fine work of Doctors Krinsky and Altshuler, Cleavon should regain full reproductive function.
Get your hands off my junk!
Yeah.
But I think the thing that they don't seem to understand, they shoot themselves in the foot, these pro-life type people, is that we have detailed data on the kind of people that get abortions. And we have detailed data on the heritability of the traits that are involved. Women that have abortions are helping to remove people like them, that is to say antisocial, unpleasant people, from the gene pool.
Yeah, we must be cruel only to be kind, is generally my attitude towards this. That's a phrase from our guy Hamlet.
Okay, a little burst from Richard and Ed. So one thing I found interesting on Vice, all right, remember Vice was mocking ivermectin and that it was essentially horse dewormer. Now we see that they're promoting a drug, a horse medicine as part of a do-it-yourself home abortion process. So when it brings about an abortion, like horse medicine is awesome. That's from Vice magazine, which is seeking a buyer because it's no longer economically viable. Right, back to this great New York Times article. And quotes another law professor noting that anti-abortion and racial segregation are explicit co-travelers, but they have different chronological origins and different original audiences. So abortion, sex control, patriarchy are a set of strong themes that develop alongside private schools with their ability to shape views of religion, sex, culture, and race, along with welfare reform and criminal law enforcement. And these things have always had race at the center of those systems. So I see synergies with conservative politics aligning with ideas about sex, sexuality, religion, and family. So historian at Vanderbilt adds there are three dimensions to the question of abortion. One is the obvious and genuine concern for fundamentalist Christian morality among the Southern polity. Some think abortion is wrong. Second dimension is the politicization of the issue to rile up the electorate. Then the third part of the issue, the overlooked part, is the deep resonance of state and regional sovereignty. So regional politics is defined by a resistance to federal authority. The federal government can run any aspect of regional cultural politics, then they can run it all. This has been a concern about just about everything since Reconstruction, including lynch law, fair employment practices, the Brown decision, busing, prayer in schools, and abortion. The issue runs deep. This is the remnants of the lost cause still blowing in the political winds. So the strength of the opposition to abortion in the American South grows out of the unique tensions in the region between notions of manhood and the evangelical attempts to control the sins of men. So there's always been a tension in Southern life between the ideals of masculinity and expectations of evangelical propriety. So in the early 20th century, preachers and earnest parishioners did their part to rein in the worst excesses of Southern manhood, be they related to drink or sex or violence. So the excessive sin led to heightened evangelistic fervor. The greater the sin, the greater the salvation, meaning masculine indiscretions were subtle ways allowed, even celebrated, among the church crowd as justifications for an equally aggressive response. Since the late 1970s, however, Southern evangelicalism has become more welcoming of the type of rugged masculinity that the Southern sinners of yesteryear displayed. So for theological as well as cultural and political reasons, Southern evangelical majority has increasingly embraced a muscular Christianity that deems protection of home and hearth and all facets of family values and notions of life and liberty associated with them, a cause worth waging with all the force and abandon required. So the enemy is now, in the Southern evangelicals' view, an effeminate liberalism and its secular humanism, which means that even those leaders who might not display Christ-like temperaments or norms are welcomed into the fold. So Southern evangelicals have jettisoned the New Testament for the Old Testament for a revival of societal reconstruction, and carved out plenty of room for the rampaging politician who can impose his will, such as Donald Trump, to remake the nation in their image. So the swashbuckling Southern rural politician enjoys more freedom than ever to play hard, even as he decries the sins of abortion and feminism. As saint and sinner, he's been granted the right and the freedom to lead the family values charge against Washington and its soft liberal elite. So abortion has become both polarized and moralized. And when issues become moralized, they become more difficult to resolve. When an issue becomes demoralized, as has been the case with gay marriage, it becomes increasingly likely to reach bipartisan consensus. So over the past 20 years, the percentage of the population saying that abortion is morally unacceptable has stayed pretty close to 50%. All right, let's get a little bit more here from Richard and Ed.
A reason, like an ancient riverbed or something like that, you're just literally stumbling over, you know, T-Rex jaws and all that great stuff.
Oh, exciting. Oh, well.
So some of these places were...
And JFRP revealed yesterday that YouTube has demonetized him and seized about $7,000 in super chats. He kept quiet about it for months. Yeah, that happened to me too when I had Lucas Back YouTube channel demonetized. YouTube kept about $3,000 in my super chats.
We went are actually mentioned in the first Jurassic Park. I think he says, I have a plane waiting in Choto. That's where I literally was in that town. Anyway, let's get started. So we're going to talk about a very, very difficult and divisive and sometimes heart-wrenching or stomach-turning subject, and that is abortion. So this has come back to attention. This whole issue of abortion seems to never really leave the political scene, at least in the United States. And there's, for forever, it's been a seemingly kind of 50-50 split between pro-life and pro-choice, at least those monikers. That's not exactly accurate, however. Roughly 70 to 75% of the American public more or less supports continuing the abortion laws that we have. That is, they are kind of effectively pro-choice or effectively status quo. But there certainly is a very organized, very passionate pro-life contingent that is always there and that is, at least for the past 30 years, been associated with the Republican Party. And
yeah, let's get a burst here from JFK.
The garden is in the morning in Australia right now. Well, I have finalized my automated watering system for the raised bed, and this is one of the things I'm most proud of in my entire life.
Way to
Look
go,
at this.
JF.
Controlled by the self. The lettuce were not doing good in the greenhouse.
Oh,
Their
no.
problem is why they are built that way. I mean, I see why. If you have an important role in their lives, even if you love them and you like them and you want to take care of them as good as you can, okay, that's already problematic, but okay, do it. But do it in private. Like, don't make symbols of these children belonging to you. Because when you enter the domain of tattoo, you enter the domain of symbols, and you're telling other people something. You're telling Kanye something with these tattoos, and you're telling him, I will be a better father than you because I have the tattoos, I care more about them. It's absolute modern cockery. I'm totally against it. He should laser them out. Panicked CNN guest wonders how we're going to control the channels of communications in this country. Of course, that would be a discussion to have on CNN. Let's see what they have to say.
No, I think there's a bigger problem that when we focus on the personalities of people like Elon Musk, and people say, oh, I think Elon's thinking this or that. There's a bigger problem here about how we are going to control the channels of communication in this country.
We're not. This country has already decided it would not control the channels of communication. There are some amount of control on broadcast waves, and really the government was able to put its dirty hands in this domain simply because there are limited wave spaces, and you have to say, all right, you are the radio station that gets this frequency, you get this frequency. But given that this problem does not exist on the internet, therefore we can return to a true First Amendment interpretation, and there is no such thing as how we're going to control the channel of communication in this country. Precisely the decision of Elon Musk is that no one will be able to, because they'll be bought out.
In 1927, we had the Radio Act. 1934, the Communications Act. Congress stepped in. We made rules. FCC wasn't great, but it's still regulating the broadcast industry.
Yes, and the broadcast industry is now dead, and it was not even justified. Those were unconstitutional organizations. They've run for many decades because basically the corporate world controlling the airwaves had an interest in being legislated. But the reality is the First Amendment goes much further. The First Amendment would make it so that the government shouldn't be able to say to a radio station, you cannot use dirty words in your broadcast. Yeah, I know that's what they do, but they shouldn't be able to do this. But with the internet, it's over now. Even if they were to try to control it, there would be ways to build independent infrastructure. Grapes Coda says, the rest of my plants aren't growing though, so yes, I need to water less, I suppose. I take JF's intermittent watering advice. It was its own rule to knock itself down and knock its own creators down, but we will have solutions emerging like Odyssey and like Twitter's Elon Musk's Twitter.
We gave over our what amounts to our airwaves or our internet waves to Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk.
And Jim Bowden says, Luke, correct me please, abortion before Roe v. Wade was always subject to each individual state and was not a federal issue. That is correct.
We are in so much trouble.
Yeah, well, it's not our airwaves. That's the point. That's the great advance of the internet. We didn't give our airwaves to Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk. They just exist. The channels of communication exist between the citizens of America. It's unstoppable. The internet has been designed in a way that it's harder to do what you want to do, and you probably won't be able to do it.
Because those guys believe in making money. We've already seen that with the 2016
I love when the leftists bring this against the big tech moguls, that, oh, they like to make money. They make money out of hate speech. It's really not what they're doing. The thing is, they are losing money, in fact, opening these trust and safety committees and these branches of their organizations. Really, they could not have those because they're protected by Section 230, so they don't have to. If they opt for being protected by Section 230, they have the protection. So the reality is they're spending money on a wasteful campaign against themselves. That's the current state of big tech, and this guy wants them to spend more.
Election. And Zuckerberg, when he was taking rubles for ads from Russia and say, oh, I think it's crazy to think they had any influence on this election. Musk is the same.
Zuckerberg was taking rubles.
Musk doesn't want it. You know, he's upset with the SEC, how dare they question him? You know what I'm saying? This is dangerous. We can't think anymore in this country. We don't have people. No, I'm serious. We don't have people in.
And I mean, Russian disinformation. I mean, we're talking about a few $1,000s in Facebook ads, and this is what the left is obsessed with. They think that a few Facebook ads change the direction of the 2016 election.
Congress, who can make regulations that can make it work. I think we can look to the Western countries in Europe for how they are trying to limit it.
But Western countries he's seething, as Nicolas Petrus says. The problem with Western Europe is that they can impede on speech because they don't have the First Amendment. There will never be successful legislation around the internet, so let it go freely. In the US, it's impossible because of the First Amendment. That's it. So these people can keep seething. It won't fix itself, and it's not because of a lack of talent in politicians or they are unable to think. It's because the structure of the American censorship is purely private because of the First Amendment. Elon Musk has given some thoughts on what he was thinking for Twitter through different threads and replies, which starts giving us a cue on what it will look like, Elon Musk's Twitter. He answered to a thread, all's well, that's Orwell. Musk tosses tactical nukes at Ministry of Truth and Trust Fund Journal. So there was initially a tweet about the new Minister of Truth is such a nice, neutral, unbiased person. So he's talking about the lady that sings, you know, I've shown her in previous shows, and his answer to this is, all well, that's Orwell. A little play of word, I guess, a play of sounds and words, but basically he's saying the Ministry of Truth is not into this, and Twitter will go its own way. Meanwhile, he also replied, this was in relation to a thread by Glenn Greenwald, who says, rich white woman, Molly Young Fast, who won the birth lottery by being born to rich, famous white parents who raised her in Manhattan, sent her to private schools, and thus herself bought an Upper East Side co-op for $5 million in 2007 at the age of 29, rants about rich white men. It's always those people who rant against rich white men. It's rich white women, basically. And Elon Musk was laughing his ass off. Oh, Mr. Krabs. So the people who are talking about privilege are often basically feeling guilty. I've never heard someone who truly had to work his way through the social ladder a little bit like I did. Although I've been lucky in life, I've certainly not have inheritancy and that kind of stuff. I've been lucky in terms of having good parents, and that's it. People like me, or people even lower than me, people who don't have the luck that I have, they don't complain about privilege. They work their way up the more they can, and they feel lucky that they have anything. So all of this stemmed from this initial thread. Someone was saying, I don't like the Twitter is amplifying the gendered barb that Elon Musk appropriated from anti-racist because a United States senator suggested he might pay more taxes and his feelings were hurt. It shouldn't be news, media shouldn't cover it, and platforms shouldn't amplify it. This was all initially from many months ago, when Elon Musk called Elizabeth Warren Senator Karen after she tweeted that the rigged tax code should be changed so the person of the year will actually pay taxes, referring to the Tesla CEO. Okay, but we can't change the tax code if someone is rich just in principle and on paper. Elon Musk is rich on paper, but he didn't sell his stock, so he didn't have running money in his bank account, and therefore, what do you want to do on the tax code? The only change you could do is start taxing property rather than income, which is a radical change that would have severe negative consequences. Grapes Coda says, that is one of the worst run-on sentences I've ever seen. Is this woman a journalist? I don't know which woman you're talking, because there were two. There's the Ministry of True Women, and there's...
Okay, so one of the glorious things to come out of this Supreme Court leak are the intensity of liberal tears. I'm enjoying that. So let's get a little bit.
The decision would be an abomination, one of the worst ever in modern history.
Honestly, I want to cry. I want to cry in so many different ways.
Look, I feel really angry about this. And what I feel angry about is that an extremist Supreme Court is going to impose their views on the rest of America.
Fundamental rights include interstate travel, include the idea of same-sex marriage, include same-sex relationships.
Wait, isn't this kind of the opposite of the Supreme Court imposing their views on the rest of America? They're saying that states get to choose what kind of laws they have about abortion. Like, whether you're pro or con this decision, it is unquestionably a move in favor of democracy. So if you're outraged by this decision, you're outraged at the prospect of Americans voting for their own laws.
Just to name a few. Now this is essentially gone. What's next?
As I was getting ready for the show this morning, I was thinking about Hillary Clinton and how this just might put her over the edge and make her jump back in. But I mean, it's just, this is the kind of news that rocks your world as a woman.
No one is safe. This overturning Roe will...
And again, a far higher percentage of women are morally opposed to abortion than men, right? Men like to bang, and men who like to bang, generally speaking, going to be fairly much in favor of abortion.
Be a mass criminalization event.
It will undercut majoritarian democracy, undermine privacy protections.
Wow, it's going to undercut majoritarian democracy by returning this issue to the people. How Orwellian is that?
And pour gasoline on our already inflamed political divisions.
This is just the beginning. Next, they'll go after gay marriage and maybe the board, what is it, Brown versus Board of Education?
Oh, no.
They already eroded our voting rights a little bit. So I see fascism down the line here. I don't know.
Oh, fascism.
Now, to reiterate, there has been no official Supreme Court decision. The people you just saw are attempting to intimidate the court, shape their final opinion, just as the leaker probably intended. We'll find out in the days and weeks ahead. Of course, this is not new. You might recall, you might remember when Chuck Schumer threatened the U.S. Supreme Court Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh during a speech right there on the steps of the U.S. Supreme Court. Take a look and ask yourself this question. If you said these words, what would happen? Take a look.
I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price.
Pay the price. And we have a long history with this. Let's not forget Ted Kennedy's totally complete dishonest diatribe about Supreme Court nominee at the time, Robert Bork. Outright lying. Take a look.
Robert Bork's America is a land in which women would be forced into back alley abortions. Blacks would sit at segregated lunch counters. Rogue police could break down citizens' doors in midnight raids. And school children could not be taught about evolution. Writers and artists would be censured at the whim of government.
Now, Ted Kennedy cared so deeply about women that he actually let one drown slowly, trapped in his car in a pond in Chappaquiddick, and he went home that night. There was a house across.
Okay, let's get a little bit more here from Richard and Ed.
In fact, they've kind of forced their will upon the Republican Party to a very large degree. But I wanted to talk about this more seriously. First off, I'll mention some details about the Texas law that was passed last week, just in case any of our viewers haven't been.
So this podcast was released September 12th of last year.
Paying attention. It's a rather strange law. For people who don't know, there is a.
So Ethan Ralph says that the police arrested him because he was pointed out as being a bomber. And so the police arrested him, checked him out, and then released him.
A very famous Supreme Court case, Roe v. Wade, that based the access to abortion upon a kind of right to privacy within the Constitution. So much of abortion legislation really has been done through the Supreme Court, and I think that's actually a big problem to begin with. But that Roe v. Wade law has been maintained for 40-some odd years, and this law that was passed in Texas doesn't directly challenge it, and that's kind of the weird thing about it. It makes abortion providers and even those people who assisted a woman get an abortion, though not the woman herself, I should add, liable in civil court to $10,000 judgments that can be brought by anyone in the country. It's a really strange way of going about it. And I think this is one of the reasons why the Supreme Court, at least for the time being, has punted on the law, claiming that there has been no harm yet, even though abortion providers have effectively shut down. Basically, you could live in Montana and you could hear about a woman who got an abortion after 6 weeks, and you could sue her, not sue her, sue the provider, or sue, say, the person who drove her, sue the person who paid for it, sue the guy who made a hamburger for it. I don't know. There must be some limit. But it does open up space for this just free-for-all of lawsuits, and that has made providing abortions effectively impossible. So after 6 weeks, there are no abortions in Texas. But again, because you can take people to court, which is just inherently debilitating, I think it raises questions of how many abortions are going to be taking place in Texas at all. I mean, you could sue someone. Are you sure it's 6 weeks? Are you sure it's 6 weeks since you've been pregnant? It's before 6 weeks. I'm not so sure. I think it might be 7, so I can sue you for 10 grand. It is a strange situation, to say the least. I don't quite know what's going to happen, but this is where we are. But I think what Ed and I should do.
J.D. Vance has won the Ohio primary. Wow. So J.D. Vance, very articulate author, making the case for nationalism, for a Republican Party that primarily caters to the working class. He has won the Ohio GOP Senate nomination, which means he most likely will be Ohio's next senator, and then it becomes a future presidential prospect.
Because, of course, there's all of this talk about this law. This is going to affect the midterm elections. It's overshadowed COVID, at least for a time. But I want to take a step back and really talk about abortion and fertility, and also I think how you can morally think about abortion, and how abortion has been viewed in the past. So, Ed, we think about the anti-abortion crusade or the pro-life cause as being a Christian thing, not even just a conservative thing, but a Christian thing that's Catholic and evangelical Christian. It's worth mentioning that it might even be a political cause. Excuse me. It might be a political cause more than a Christian cause. When Roe v. Wade was decided, the Southern Baptist Convention endorsed the decision. And they said, this is we all respect a woman's right to privacy. It was only later that it became the centerpiece of the religious right and became very important in left-right politics in America. But what has been the Christian response to an abortion throughout the ages?
Well,
abortion has not been a huge issue in Christianity. I grew up in Seventh-day Adventism, which is very liberal on abortion. But growing up in Australia and European Christianity, Australian Christianity, abortion was not a big deal. So Scott McConnell, co-founder of the American Conservative magazine, he tweets, J.D. Vance didn't go for the "We Are Ukraine" stuff so common and seemingly required for everyone. Thought this would kill him. Well, it didn't. So media will try to spin this as Trump still controls the rubes or something, and Trump's endorsement was crucial, but J.D. Vance is a brilliant and brave guy. He is not a natural politician, and he will be an historic senator. So J.D. Vance wins the Republican nomination for Senate. And Peter Thiel massively invested in J.D. Vance.
body of the latter is formed. And
Right.
you know Maimonides, the Jewish
Mhm.
sort of early medieval theologian, Maimonides.
Oh, of course I know him. Yeah.
Maimonides, yes. Now Maimonides had this. He invented this concept of the Nephil, and the Nephil is the neonate who is doomed to die. And if the child was born early, it was a Nephil rather than a proper human, and therefore it didn't have a soul.
Hmm. Fascinating. I think things have changed quite a bit. I mean, as we've talked about this, the pro-life movement has made a very strong claim that life just begins at conception, the moment the sperm hits the egg. And I think any reasonable person would agree that there's something has happened. So at least potential for life or some kind of life form has occurred. I think the wide availability of ultrasounds has probably shifted consciousness a little bit in the sense of you have a kind of photograph of a fetus and you feel like, well, this is clearly a real person and so on. I think that has changed opinions. I mean, we should remember that abortions are declining pretty significantly since the 1970s. I think for many different factors, but they still make up, from what we were looking at, between 18 to 20% of all pregnancies do end in abortion, and thus it's an issue that at least has to be addressed seriously. And I don't think a way, particularly in the current situation where we are now, I don't think addressing it by declaring it bloody murder is really all that helpful. I think there is a great deal of moral ambiguity in it. We're going to talk about the effects of it later. But one thing that I've noticed, and which it's always bothered me, I mean, I generally support abortion rights, but is that the pro-life movement never wants to actually go after the mother in terms of persecution or criminal charges or civil charges in this latter Texas scheme. So there was a moment in 2016, it's largely forgotten now, but Donald Trump had discovered that he was pro-life, like many other Republicans who want to seek the Republican nomination, discover that, like George Herbert Walker Bush and many others. And he was asked, oh, you want to ban abortions, and would this be criminalized to the extent that women would be arrested? And Donald Trump thought about it for a moment. He said, well, yes, we would have to do that, which is a reasonable response. If you're going to claim that this is murder, or at the very least a crime, you're going to simply have to take into account the woman who has the abortion. And he got hit from both sides. So the liberals freaked out, of course, but then the pro-life movement freaked out in the sense because they hated Trump. At that point, they hated Trump. And they were saying, well, this is not how we think about the issue. And you kind of do have to think about the issue in that way if you're going to declare this murder. The fact that women can't be sued, but the abortion provider can be sued in Texas, it's morally speaking, it's the same thing as saying, well, we want to arrest the hitman who's profiting off murder. But the person who hired the hitman, she's an innocent victim
Yes,
of the profiteering hitman. Give me a break.
I don't think in England, anyway, prostitution isn't illegal. But being a pimp, profiting from prostitution, that's illegal. But actually being a prostitute is not illegal. So it's a sort of similar silly equivalence. And
not giving agency to women, by the way.
No, they're not. If anything, it could be considered a highly sexist set of laws.
Yes.
So I wonder how Ethan Ralph is doing after getting arrested outside the
I like
Supreme
everyone.
Court.
I like Honcho. Thank you, Honcho. Corinne, IRL, CORNNE says thank you. Thank you so much.
I think they have, I don't know any stake here, but I swear we're going to have to go.
Neon Nicker sent $3. Imagine if Corinne was your mom and years from now you see these streams.
Who cares? What does that mean? Next, that was stupid. That was the stupidest donation ever. Who made me want to be a sinner?
I don't think you needed much encouragement.
I do, actually do.
Corinne, we love you, sent $3. Are you going to make an appearance at Ralphomania? Are you going to get in the ring?
Yes.
Are you accepting applications? I think we would make beautiful babies together.
Yes, but you have to be unvaccinated. I only want unvaccinated cum.
Oh, God, disavow.
I only want the cum of unvaccinated men, not little boys. I only like men. I like men, real men.
She's
Try and
insane.
stop. You're freaking out the chat.
Night Driving Avengers sent $3. Corn smell.
Well, it's good to see a real triumph of the human spirit that Ethan Ralph isn't allowing his arrest to get him down.
Arrest that mother earlier. I didn't get to see that because I walked outside.
Yeah, someone sent Ethan Ralph a clip. I didn't harass her. I just said, take the mask off your face. Take the mask off your child's face. Free your face. Free yourself. Be free at last.
impressed her. I mean, maybe not. Right?
Really good.
Baby Pepe sent $3. Ralph, for the love of everything holy, take the...
I'm about to take it back.
Okay, take the phone back.
No, it's fine. I know where I'm going. This place is good.
But do you think it's going to stay open?
Yeah, I know for a fact it's going to be open.
Okay, that's inspiring to see that Ethan Ralph has rebounded from his arrest.
A high patriarchal set of laws.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that they don't seem to understand, they shoot themselves in the foot, these pro-life type people, is that we have detailed data on the kind of people that get abortions. And we have detailed data on the heritability of the traits that are involved. So there was research indicating people that have abortions, and particularly people that have multiple abortions, which is 42% of women that have had an abortion have had more than one in England, have different personality traits for those that not. People that have abortions are high in histrionic personality traits. That is to say, they are attention-seeking, they are low in agreeableness, they're just basically unstable and not very nice people. They are high in narcissistic personality traits, which includes low empathy and low altruism, and they are high in antisocial personality traits, that is to say, psychopathic personality traits. So the kind of women that have abortions are on average narcissistic, psychopathic, and histrionic. And the heritability of these traits is at least 0.5, if not higher, if not more in the region of 0.6.
Yeah, let's,
and so women that have abortions are helping to remove
some of these
people like them, that is to say, antisocial, unpleasant people, from the gene pool.
Oh my God. I gotta go back and watch you harass that mother earlier. You know, I didn't get to see that because I walked outside.
Yeah, someone sent Ethan Ralph a clip. I didn't harass her. I just said, take.
Yeah, I know for a fact it's going to be open.
$3. I am now getting...
My girlfriend Fiorella is going to Russia and to let you raise her.
Yes. Is she hot?
Yes, she's going to Russia.
Really?
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay. Let's meet her.
Anonymous sent $3. I am now getting vaccinated ASAP.
Oh, I see. Just in case.
Do it. Boosted and vaccinated. Get both.
This fucking pen doesn't even work. I'll wait till I get stopped to try to fuck with it.
Okay, where are you going?
Yeah, I'm actually hungry. I haven't eaten today.
I know.
Well, that's not true. We had some queso. We had a little bit of queso. But that's it. Yeah, I'm hungry. Then the police fucked with me. I thought we got some good footage before. Hey, what's going on at the Capitol? I haven't been able to see. I mean, at the Supreme Court.
Is this place open until midnight?
I can't really read chat.
Is this place open until midnight?
Iverson sent $3 and calling the police Corinne sexually harassed the whole chat.
Wow.
What?
Hey, hold this down here where they can't see where I'm going.
They can't see. I don't want to get in trouble. I know.
Corinne, you're not. Just kidding.
You're fine.
Yeah, let's hold it up here so they can see every fucking landmark there is on the way there. Yeah, that's good. That's a good idea.
Gotta have some OPSEC here. Ethan Ralph, the triumph of the human spirit.
You apparently don't know how autistic some of these fuckers
they
are.
They want that. They're crying out. Like in Ireland, you have these appalling witches on this bus from Dublin to Belfast singing this song to Val Dunican. We need abortion, like making light of it. We need abortion, quick, simple, and free. I'm like, please surely let them have abortions. They want to resign from the gene pool, and it is for the good of the gene pool that they do so.
Yeah, we must be cruel only to be kind, is generally my attitude towards this. That's a phrase from our guy Hamlet. But it's hard for me not to agree. And I think there's also been and this is even worth discussing in itself, there has been a noticeable change in the sense that abortion in the 70s was declared a right of privacy.
And Bell says, Luke, these $3 text-to-speech chats are evidence of defeat. Nick Fuentes takes them now. Fuentes has 2-hour shows these days. Healthy shows, 3 hours, dollar-wise. But yeah, $3 to have your say, I'm not sure. This is really helping public discourse.
Which is a kind of euphemism, you could say. The famously, Bill Clinton said abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. So they kind of inherently said this is not something we want to do, but it's not something that we want to make illegal and just open up this huge can of worms by doing that, including potentially throwing women in prison.
Know, in my book, which is Feminism and the Fall of the West, I talked about this, where I did an article on a woman that had 3 abortions.
This is what I wanted to get to. Talk about her a little bit.
Well, okay, yeah, let's talk about her. I met her at a conference, at an academic conference, and then one day, years ago, whenever it was, 10 years ago, when I was working for this English language newspaper, I put out abortion in Finland is the most restricted of any Scandinavian country. You have to go in and say you want an abortion, then you have to go in and think about it for a week or something, then you have to come back. There's no abortion on demand. It's more strict conservative here. And so I thought, well, this is in the news. That's my hook. So I'll do an article about it for the newspaper about abortion in Finland. I'll interview someone that's had an abortion. So I put out on Facebook, look, has anyone had an abortion? If so, get in touch with me anonymously. And this girl wrote back and said, I volunteer. And she hadn't just had one; she'd had three. And the first one, she was going out with this boyfriend, and he was a drug addict and whatever, and so she had an abortion. Then she got pregnant, and she kept that child. And then the third time, she didn't feel bad about it because she took the morning after pill, but it just didn't work. That was the second occasion. So she felt that's fair enough for me to have an abortion. And then she got pregnant another time. And so she obviously just didn't learn from her mistakes. She wasn't able to efficiently use contraception. I got the distinctive, she was underweight. She was underweight. So I got the impression she was quite sort of mentally unstable, which is consistent with the kind of people that get abortions. And then so she told me all this, and I did the article. And then sometime later, I met her in a cafe just by chance. And it was just really tense because I knew too much and she knew I knew too much. It was just horrible. Nothing to say to each other anymore. And I think that there is a sense in which she did feel, because she said so, that she felt what she was doing when she first did it was very, very wrong. And she remembered crying and saying, my baby will never see this sunrise. She felt on some level that it was murder. And I think on some level, a lot of women do think that. Even if they haven't, they still kind of think it. And I think a lot of us, you kind of can't help but thinking that embryo, even if it is got no consciousness, it's got no feelings, whatever, but it has the potential for life, for human life, and is completely and totally reliant on its mother and on the love of its mother. It's totally reliant on it in the way that mother was once in the same position, reliant on her own mother not to fall down the stairs, not to drink, not to stick a knitting needle up herself in a warm bath, whatever. It is the most vulnerable member of our community, and yet it is, or future member of our community, and yet it is the member of our community that has less rights than an animal. And so you can see the cognitive dissonance that it brings about.
It does have. I agree. I have something. Hopefully something that's interesting to say on this. Real quick on less rights than an animal. I did find it fascinating that Pete Buttigieg, the one-time presidential candidate who we talked about a year or so ago, he and Chasten or not so Chasten, they have had a surrogate child, and they actually photographed themselves in a hospital bed for some reason holding a newborn. And it's interesting because I recently got a new dog, and you usually wait about 6 weeks with a puppy because the dog needs to breastfeed, bond with his mother, bond with his siblings, and so on. A human child, however, is ripped right from his mother's arms and put into the hands of Chasten. It is rather shocking.
Pete Buttigieg has a husband.
Yes.
Is he a queer?
It's very brave. Yeah.
He is a queer. But yes.
You're the only one who thinks he's not gay. You're like, is he gay?
No,
he's a quack.
It's definitely a quack. No, it's a definite. That sketch we did about it. But no, it's a definite problem. It's a definite. It's something that makes me personally unsure. But on the one hand, there is some sense in which.
Okay, let's check in with Mr. Ethan Ralph. How's the boy doing? Whoa, whoa. Look at that guy. Whoa. Whoa. I better turn off the music, but I think twice before messing with Ethan Ralph, man.
A community that triumphs over other communities in the battle of group selection has a sense of itself as sacred and a sense of itself as God being on its side. God bless America.
And Trump's having a good night based on these endorsements. All right, so let's get to it. J.D. Vance is in yellow. You see how much yellow covers the map here throughout the state of Ohio. What you were talking about down here in the southwestern part of the state, this is Hamilton County. This is Cincinnati. Dolan expected to do well in this city, okay? But J.D. Vance lives there, and he's holding his own right now. Just north of here, you mentioned, Butler County. Vance doing well there. Also, there's a little town here called Middletown. It's right on the border of Butler County and Warren County. Why do I mention that? If you follow the book and the movie of Hillbilly Elegy, that is where J.D. Vance spent a lot of his youth. Remember, he was from Kentucky, moved to southwestern Ohio. That was the spot right there in Middletown. You mentioned Claremont, too. Listen, Vance is doing really well here also. You mentioned Warren. Let me just jump over here to Warren County as well and just watch what Vance is doing. He's at 36%. So this, I mean, you find a lot of Republican votes in southwestern Ohio. That is point number one. Point number two in the middle, you talked about Columbus, Ohio. This is Franklin County. Dolan expected to do well here. He's doing decent. But he's from northern Ohio, and I'm going to show you right now where he really expected to do well. I mentioned Delaware County, and I showed this a bit earlier today. This is where Trump had the rally with J.D. Vance, and he's at 35% in Delaware County. If Josh Mandel or Dolan really wanted to cut in Vance's lead, you expect to see that perhaps in counties like Delaware, quickly growing, rather affluent. This is Cuyahoga County in Cleveland. Dolan's doing well here also, but again, it's the rest of this state where you see J.D. Vance just wiping up. You know, in the southwest and the southern part of the state, some of these rural counties, also up here in the northeast also. Remember when Trump won in 2016? We were at the board that night, Sean, and I was showing you that these are counties that have been held by Democrats for 50 years. And Trump broke through that wall. And listen, I mean, there are going to be a lot of pieces written this week about Trump's endorsement and what it means. I can tell you that, I mean, this is J.D. Vance territory right now, okay? Go back a year and a half ago. This is Biden and Trump in Ohio. And this is Trump winning easily by 8 points. What we don't show on the map is what he did in 2016 when he won the state by 8 points as well. Ohio is a red state. Ohio is a Trump state based on the two presidential elections. So far tonight, we come back here to the Senate race. Trump went in there and made endorsements in 12 different races, of which one I'm just showing you right now with J.D. Vance here. In Ohio, who looks to be in a comfortable position right now with about half of the vote counted. He made endorsements in 11 other races. So far tonight, he is 9 for 9 in the congressional races, and he is leading in the 3 others, including the Senate race. It's a pretty good night for the former president. On the Democratic side, Tim Ryan has been called for him. Nobody was really thinking about this, right? 70% of the vote counted for Tim Ryan. He is a Democrat.
Okay, let's have a look at a tweet here from Joseph Cotto. He says, as I grow older, I come to like the America I live in less and less. It has no common culture, no core of identity, an increasingly polarized electorate, a toxic pop culture, an ever more activist left-wing media and academic government complex, and a generally ignorant populace. So is it really America is just getting worse and worse and worse? Or is Joseph Cotto unhappy with his life and then he projects on to America? And I don't know which one, but I do notice with many people on the distant right, it's very clear that they're unhappy with their life and then they project on that unhappiness onto wider America. America has all the problems that Joseph Cotto lists, but I live in the same America with many of these problems, and I feel like I'm as happy as a clam. So if Joseph Cotto is not happy, I don't think it's America that's primarily at issue there. If you're unhappy, it's not primarily because of America, it's primarily because of you.
The sanctity of life and all of this sort of thing. And abortion and the fact that Christianity, which I'm going to argue in a future book is highly group selected, it sanctifies life like that, is perhaps part of its success in a way that others don't. I mean, abortion is perfectly acceptable. You'll get women that are pregnant among the Yanomami of Venezuela, and they'll get their friends to jump on their stomachs.
Right.
Or they'll just commit infanticide.
Level of assurance that J.D. Vance has been called the winner of the Republican primary.
It's interesting because there are going to be other states too. I know, for example, Oz in Pennsylvania, who I'm supporting, he's had tens and tens of millions of dollars. I believe President Trump has a rally with him later this week. It's going to be interesting to see if that effect carries in a lot of states.
You got North Carolina and you got Georgia, and we got a story to follow to see what this party does.
All right, Bill Hemmer at the big board. Thank you, sir. When we come back, the great one, Mark Levin, and what.
Yeah, the great one, Mark Levin. I really wonder what Mark Levin has to say. But if Donald Trump runs in 2024, he seems to be poised for a victory.
country, but
Well,
I do
extends,
continue.
I don't think it extends to the Yanomamo. I think that they have their own.
True.
And exposure, of course, the Greeks practiced exposure. Aristotle wrote about his disbelief that the Egyptians didn't practice exposure.
Right.
So it was perfectly, if you had an unhealthy child, you just left it out for the to be taken away, whatever. And so there's this sanctity of life element which they are lacking. But on the other hand, there is something logical about it. I mean, if you think about the chaos that's happening in Ireland now, it has gone from being an extremely religious conservative society, which it was the first time I went there in 2002, to within 10 years or a bit more than that, being more woke than England. And it's just incredible how much it has flipped. And it strikes me that it might be relevant to that they didn't legalize abortion until a few years ago.
Yeah.
So all of these histrionic, narcissistic, psychopathic women who in England since 1967 would have been proportionately more likely to have abortions, in Ireland probably would have been, well, they would have been less likely to. Okay, the ones that had a bit of money would make their way to England and have an abortion in England. That was a...
And Marlo says Joseph Cotto is saying he's unhappy with America, not that he's unhappy. That armchair psychologizing was unnecessary. Well, it's just a general perspective. Like, why is it that a certain text or a certain event or a certain piece of music or a certain film or certain politics resonates with you? It says something about you. So when I talk, I'm not just saying something about Joseph Cotto. If I talk about Joseph Cotto, I am in part perhaps talking about Joseph Cotto, but I'm probably primarily talking about myself. So if I'm saying something on abortion, ostensibly I'm commenting on abortion, but I'm probably saying more about myself. Whatever, use what language you will, you cannot say anything but what you are. And we cannot help but look out through the world through a particular pair of glasses. And when you change the pair of glasses, then you change your perspective on the world. So I wasn't slamming Joseph Cotto. I was just making the point that the position of the observer is an integral part of the data. And personal unhappiness is a driving force for the more extreme brands of politics. And I don't regard Joseph Cotto as extreme, but I don't believe that trends in America are the primary things that would make people unhappy, right? There's certainly some negative trends in America, but there are also some positive trends in America. Overall, the situation in America is not the primary cause of any Americans' unhappiness.
A well-known phenomenon, the abortion boat to Liverpool to get an abortion. But otherwise, so you've just got this build-up of ghastly people, and those were the very people that were making their way on that bus to Belfast, singing their light-hearted song about abortion.
Right. It's this ironic cycle of a Christian society kind of sets the stage for a decadent society that is going to become anti-Christian and then maybe back again. I would add this. I mean, I agree with most everything you're saying. I would add this. The way that people argue for and against abortion is all within the confines of a rational liberalism. And so, for instance, yes, you can certainly find a pro-life Christian who will simply say, this is in the Bible. No, we follow the Bible literally. We can, of course, find that. But what you mostly find is an argument that goes something like this. This person, first off, life does begin at conception, even if a fetus or even an early multiplying cells are not conscious. There is that spark of life, and so they must be treated like a human, and they are the most vulnerable humans out there. So this is all liberalism, human rights type arguments. And where else do they go with this? Oh, right. A lot of people who are pro-choice will talk about rape or child molestation or incest or some of these just really terrible things. And the pro-life answer to that is, well, it's rape, incest, molestation, those are already crimes. But the life, and so anyone who engages in that should be prosecuted. But the life in question is not the woman, it's actually the child. And the child has not engaged in rape or incest or child molestation. So his rights should be protected. But it's all that human rights kind of dogma. The other liberal version of this, whether, it might just be based on just pure choice and, it's great to get an abortion so you can go have more sex and career or whatever. But if they actually want to explain it, they also explain it within terms of liberalism. So this is your body and you are in control. You have total sovereignty over your body. You can do with it whatever you want. You can be abstinent. You could be a pornography actress. It's up to you. And a parasite in your body kind of does not have rights over you. So that
is the movement to this individualistic worldview, which is.
But both are individualistic. I guess what I'm saying is, Permit me if I just say this, and I'm not trying to be pretentious, but Immanuel Kant's, he criticized pure rationality. What he understood is that if you engage in just pure reasoning, you are going to reach a paradox at some point. And Zeno found this out long before Plato. What he meant is pure reason is actually limited, and it has to interface with the real world to be taken seriously. Both of those arguments, which I represented, are pure liberal reasoning, and they're both kind of right. And I don't think they're ever going to defeat the other argument, because you're just engaging in the abstract language of rights in both cases. And yeah, there's a little feminism potpourri thrown in here, and there's a little bit of Christian spice thrown in here, but it's still a liberal argument, and you just can't get past that.
A counter argument is that exactly, is that we are a group oriented species, and yes, you are an individual woman, but that child, that fetus, is part of the group.
Right.
It's distinct. Forget about whether it has rights. I don't care about that. It's part of the group, and it's a matter for other people, not just you.
Yes.
It's about.
Would you say that men should become warriors and women should birth warriors? All else is folly, perhaps?
I wouldn't say that, but it's their relative. It's their
right.
Relative.
What I mean is, you make a non-liberal argument.
It's their
basically,
child. It's their uncle, their nephew, their niece, their co-ethnic, and it relates to them, and you relate to them as well. And so this idea that you're separate and distinct from the body, from the group of which you're part, no, you're not. You're reliant on that group and its cooperative interaction and what it produces and whatever in order to survive. And therefore, you can't be separated from it in such a black and white way. I think that's the argument. And I also think that I quite like Dave Chappelle's argument, which is that well, why is it that the women have the right? They can just say I can have an abortion. Okay, that's their right. They're right. Well, then surely the man should have the right to say, look, bitch, if you're going to have this baby that I don't want, then I don't have to support it. That would be he should have a right as well. Surely he should have the right to say, look, I don't want to have this child. You're going to go ahead and have it. I don't want it. So I shouldn't be hassled to support it. Which I thought was he does make quite an intelligent point.
I remember I had an English teacher in high school who noted, why is it that all the women who are most adamantly against abortion are women you wouldn't want to have sex with anyway? Well, people who are most adamantly against abortion tend to be older, and they tend to be more religiously and politically zealous, and not exactly the young, winsome demographic. So you're probably wondering what the heck is going on with Ethan Ralph. Why did he get arrested?
You're free bird, okay? Not only that, Nick Fuentes heartbroken, folks. He's a heartbroken, jilted, scorned ex-lover. His dumper-pumping buddy, Jaden, has abandoned him. Jaden's in contact with CWC. Jaden's in contact with Jake Lloyd and APU. And you know who else is in contact with the APU president? PPP. Whoa! That's right, folks. We might get Jaden McNeil on this Friday's edition of Bikino Casino.
Let's go!
Oh, fuck, folks. And not only that, Beardson is Batman. I'm Beardson. Dalton's the Joker.
It's so bad.
Guys! It's beyond cringe. I've only managed to watch 6 seconds of it. There's 30 minutes of footage, folks. We may not show it all, but there's 30 minutes of footage. And by the way, folks, buried in it all, Ralph had a barbecue.
Oh.
He showed us his boxing form. Andy is really scared, guys.
Oh.
Andy is terrified. Andy is pissing and shitting in his dungaroos because the Ralph male called him out at the barbecue. And apparently we don't even have barbecue in Canada, Andy. Did you notice we don't have hamburgers or hot dogs? We just have beaver tails and moose meat? According to Ralph, this is all that we have, and we live in fucking igloos. We've never seen a fucking barbecue in all our lives. There's not one boomer in Canada who grills. It's just all Amerimuts. This is what he wants to fucking tell us. But folks, we're not going to believe the lies. We're going to fucking follow the bumblebees, and we're going to expose the federal conspiracy, folks. It's confirmed. Ralph is a CI. A confidential informant. He was busted out by the feds, and I have footage of him going around collecting people's license plate numbers at the trucker rally. I have that footage, folks. It will be played at some point, maybe not today, maybe Friday, and I'll show you guys the proof that Ralph was collecting people's doxes and fucking filming their license plate numbers at the event. But,
by the way, Ralph's been trying the last 3 or 4 days. His
damnedest to get out of the fight, which he can't seem to get out of it. You know, he has to fight me at this point, ladies and gentlemen, okay? So Boogie is going to fight Sam Hyde, and Boogie today posted this. I think this is interesting. What do you all think? This is his form so far. Let's check it out. Boogie, go ahead.
Power! Look at the raw power in those shots. A fucking mastodon, a sexual tyrannosaur pumped up on testosterone. Play it again. Look at the power. Look at the animalistic
Sam's done.
primal rage.
Sam's done, bro.
Sam melted, buddy. Sam was going down. Going down in the very first round. Look at this fucking technique. Look at the way he times it, bro. Look at it.
People
like
think
one,
that
two,
American culture is in terminal decline.
From
I haven't
Boogie.
seen what's going on
YouTube. You know, he's got the leg twist.
If Sam just agrees to stand in front of Boogie, they just swing and don't move at all. Boogie has at least a 1% chance to win this fight. Can you imagine if he gets all of his weight behind one of those blows and just connects right Sam's chin? Sam gets rocked, he's wobbled. He comes in with the fucking mean left hook after and just puts him down for an eternity.
Hey.
Sam Hyde will never fucking live it down.
Hey, your internet's being a bit choppy, by the way.
What a disaster. Hold on.
Do you want to see if you can fix it? By the way, thank you so much. Thank you all for the entertainment. Thank you so much.
Son, I need to get it off the internet now. You know, like his flamenco, he's like, flamenco's grandpa's ashamed of him. He's dead and he died ashamed of his faggot grandson who got bummed up the ass. And I was like, maybe Ralph has the point here, you know. Maybe the grandpa really was ashamed of Flam. And apparently, you know, Ralph emailed this, like, Flam's porn history to his whole family, which is pretty fucked up. But I was just waiting for, like, Flam's dad to burst into his bedroom and be like, I'm cutting it down now, son. I need to get it off the internet now. You know, like, because Flam lives with his fucking parents still. Or whatever. I was waiting for him to kick him off the internet.
Yeah, I'm just watching this purely for research purposes. Oh, man, what happened to Ralph? Is that it for Ralph?
But fuck you, Ralph, you slimeball piece of shit for doing that to Flamenco's family.
Oh, my favorite thing that he ever did was the fucking barbecue. Like Andy, you see this, you motherfucker? Like, we'll watch it in a second here. Jack Tucson, Tucson for 10. Sneaking up to people. No, but yeah, thank you so much. Spring of Light for
Well, the break, I mean, Nick's saying it's Jaden didn't compliment him enough. I didn't get enough compliments,
guys,
bro.
Today's show is insane. It is absolutely a banger tonight. Everyone hit that fucking like button and welcome to the show. We're going to get into it right after I am. And remember, we're reading all the donos that are under
like copper where I'm at. And it's hurting as fuck, folks. So we get like 1 megabit per second.
First of all, look at his posture, dude. Everyone was like,
no, like he's like a hunchback. Like,
fine.
Look at this chin, bro. It's like fucking like, how many chins is that?
Oh my god.
Like, what the fuck, man? There's like a meat bag hanging, bro.
Well, these personal remarks. Come on, guys.
Look at the first chin,
the
bro.
honorable
It's like
argument is
droopy,
facts
like
and
he has
logic.
Down syndrome or some sort of physical disability that involves mental retardation or.
I gotta disavow these kind of personal insults. Let's get back to the high-minded conversation.
No, Chappelle. Yeah, it's I mean, there was a.
But all the intelligent points is when you get away from liberal rationality. I guess that's just what I'm trying to put forward. It's like engaging in pure mathematics to understand politics. You're just going to reach these weird paradoxes. Both liberal arguments are correct. I can't find like logical faults with them, but that just proves that that's not the way you should think about the world. And Dave Chappelle is a lot smarter than middle-class liberal because he kind of gets it of like there are incentives involved here and so on. And I think it actually is moral to apply pragmatism to this to the case of abortion and ask who's having these abortions.
Well, yes, indeed. I mean, we know it doesn't. There was research by Michael Woodley of Mani and his team, which found that there's no correlation between intelligence and abortion. You think there might be, because you thought these. Perhaps there is now, but perhaps it's changing. But when he did the study, based on what you have two kinds of people that have abortions. You have these low IQ people, basically, that leave it too late and they can't use the morning after pill, and so they have to have an abortion. And then you get sort of middle class, unpleasant people.
Yeah,
and they have and also older people, just women that are older, and they find out they've got a child with Down syndrome or something, and they have an abortion, and they'll often be more intelligent, and so they sort of cancel each other out. So abortion doesn't seem to be doing anything to intelligence. It doesn't seem to be reducing intelligence. It may even be increasing it, because it strikes me that the abortion statistics now, for America anyway, are that it's overwhelmingly poorer people that have abortions, and those people will tend to be of lower intelligence. And I guess this is because people that are more educated and richer just aren't having babies, and so having babies and thus abortions is a matter for the less well off. And then, of course, it's those personality traits. And those personality traits, I mean, they are dysgenic. Those are the kinds of people you don't want in the society. I mean, talk about a Christian perspective. There was actually the Dean of St. Paul's Cathedral, the Very Reverend William Ing, and he presented a Christian case for eugenics, including abortion. And he said a good tree, he said the Sermon on the Mount itself implies that humans are animals that can be worse or better bred. And he said, a good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit. It says that in the Bible. And he said, this is quite clear saying that we should have eugenics. And he said that eugenicists believe that unless civilization is guided by scientific principles, it must come to ruin. We stand by scientific as against emotional or sentimentalist ethics. And he was a leading Christian of his time.
I mean, look, I God bless him, but that's not. You rarely hear those kinds of sentiments from Christians. In fact, what we've seen is a kind of reaction to the Texas law of almost endorsing dysgenics, of promoting Down syndrome births, I think 80 to 100% of which are terminated in European countries like France and Iceland. I was looking at the statistics of these, and the majority of them are terminated in the United States through abortion. But again, the people who are really in support of the Texas law were just, they were becoming almost radically dysgenic.
It's 70% in the United States Down syndrome, 90% in Britain, and in Iceland they have a policy that they want to be Down syndrome free. So you do notice it. I remember when I was a child, you would see these people with Down syndrome about, and now you don't. They're all dead, and there aren't new ones. Finland. Well,
some of them host podcasts.
Finland has a rate of 50% only for Down syndrome abortion.
Right.
So you do see quite a few of them here. But no, not and the expense involved. I mean, the expense and the illness and the whatever it is unbelievable. The expense, and the constant chronic illness that they have. It's huge, long list of terrible problems.
Right, and we're just in a different society. I mean, sadly, we just have to recognize this fact that children were once considered assets and are now kind of considered liabilities. Now, I am perfectly willing to impoverish myself on behalf of my children because I get it. But the fact is, you don't have more kids and then they help out at the farm, and it's almost like this just benefit. You're getting dividends from children. No, you have children and you raise them. That's a lot of time, money for education, and so on going forward. And whether they're going to actually take care of you when you're 90 or something, you hope so, but it's not guaranteed.
Good,
we just had a different.
We didn't have leaks in this campaign. We didn't have people stabbing each other in the back. We were a team, and we will be a team all the way to November. I have absolutely got to thank the 45th, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Ladies and gentlemen, one, for giving us an example of what could be in this country. Ladies and gentlemen, remember 2019 when wages were going up and not down? Remember 2019 when workers were doing well in this country, not struggling terribly? Thanks to the president for everything, for endorsing me. And I got to say, a lot of the fake news media out there, and there are some good ones in the back there. There's some bad ones too, let's be honest. But they wanted to write a story that this campaign would be the death of Donald Trump's America First agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, it ain't the death of the America First agenda. It wasn't just the president, of course. We had a lot of endorsements, especially some of our early endorsements. I want to make sure I give some shout outs to Penny Nance, great advocate for life and for people all across the country.
Let me go back to...
Okay, let's check in on Russia versus Ukraine. Almost as big as Ethan Ralph versus Warski.
Hey everyone, Peter Zeihan here, coming to you from Colorado. Today I wanted to talk about the change in the Russian strategy, not necessarily from an economic point of view, but more from a political one. The key issue was that giant convoy on the third day of the war that was coming from Belarus down to Kiev, something like 40 miles long, thousands of vehicles. And it stalled out in a day because the Russians forgot fuel trucks. And then it got abandoned for a while because the Russians forgot food and logistical supply. And that's kind of been the defining factor of the war to this point, is the Russians just seem to be utterly incompetent in logistics and multi-domain operations. So the West took one lesson from that, which I've already spoken to. The Russians took another one. The Russians now realize that they're not going to be welcomed in as liberators, and that means they view the entire Ukrainian population and anyone who supports them as a mortal enemy. The Russians feel that this is an existential crisis for them. They know that if they can't advance just through Ukraine, but beyond it, that they're not going to be able to survive in the long term from a strategic point of view. They just don't have the demographic strength to do it. So the whole idea is you use your troops to plug gaps, but first they have to get through Ukraine. And so they're falling back on a much older strategy, one they used against Napoleon, one they used against Hitler, one they used in Chechnya, one they used in Syria. And that is the complete obliteration of all civilian infrastructure. And the idea behind that is threefold. Number one, if you make an area uninhabitable in industrial age, then people feel they have to leave. So number two, it generates a huge number of refugees by design. And then third, you have a lot of people who, for whatever reason, stay, most of whom are not fighters, but the Russians don't care. Their idea is if you destroy all the civilian infrastructure and someone stays behind, then clearly they have an independent food supply that's coming from abroad, so clearly they are a fair game and you can kill them on sight. To that end, the Russians have recalled most of their Wagner Group mercenaries. They've recruited militants from within the Syrian space. They're tapping the Chechens. And basically, the Russians are advancing slowly with artillery until there's nothing left standing. And then they send in these groups to execute on site everyone they find. We also know from Russian intercepts that the Bucha massacres were not one-offs. They're happening throughout the space that the Russians have occupied. It's inhumane by really any measure, but the Russians are very good at fighting this sort of war. Also, by design, it generates a huge number of refugees. So, okay,
I just want to check in with Fox News at the top of the hour here.
January 360 this weekend is going to be on which do you identify with? If you think it ought to be Birthing Persons Day, you ought to be a Democrat. If you think it ought to be Mother's Day, you ought to be a Republican. It's that simple. And that's why they're going to lose, and I think lose maybe for 2 generations, because they're just nuts.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, if Kevin McCarthy, if you're right, and apparently the president was not angry at the tapes that were released and they have made amends, that's between them. I'm not getting in the middle of that. But if they follow your lead, that you laid out an agenda, a positive agenda to save the country like you did in '94, it will be 94, 2010, and maybe even bigger. Anyway, Mr. Speaker, thanks for being with us. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have left. Please set your DVR, never miss an episode. Thank you for making this show possible. Let not your heart be troubled. A great show. Laura Ingraham is next. Have a great night.
I'm Laura Ingraham. This is Ingram Angle from a hysterical Washington tonight. Thanks for joining us. We're going to have more on J.D. Vance's big Ohio win a little bit later in the show and other races that went the America First way. But first, the anti-Democrats. That's the focus of tonight.
Okay, we'll pass on that. Let's get back to Zeihan.
As of April 29, the day I'm recording this, we already know there's at least 8.3 million refugees who have fled the country, and another 7.7 that are internally displaced within the country. And the UN estimates that there's another 12 million Ukrainians who are trapped in place by the war because of either the destruction of the infrastructure or the shells are still falling. So Collectively, that's over half of Ukraine's pre-war population. And we know now that the Russians are going to do this everywhere. It doesn't matter to the Russians who the target is. So, for example, the cities of Kharkiv and Mariupol have been under assault since the beginning. These are ethnic Russian cities. These are places that were relatively pro-Russia before the war. They're certainly not now. And that means that the Russian strategy of tapping fifth columns before the war probably isn't going to carry on, because whether you're a Russian in Kazakhstan or Georgia or Latvia or Moldova, you now know that the Russians really don't care about not just their ethnic kin, but their own ethnicity, and that changes some of the math.
I don't think we failed, frankly. We conduct our military operation. It's not a war. It's a military operation. It has its own strategy. It has its own aims.
Now, because of the size of the refugee community, it's already far larger than any refugee movements we have seen in history ever, and it's happened so fast. So more people are now displaced than during even the Indian partitions. And there's only so many people who can help. One of the groups that can help is a group called the AFYA Foundation, AFYAfoundation.org. It's a group that we have decided to help share with the world, and I've got as many people as possible. AFYA is now bringing gains across the entire country, and that means we have a country of 45 million people that is either going to descend into partisan warfare or into a massive refugee community, or both. So please give what you can so that folks like AFYA can kind of get a jump start on this. And put together, that's about 15,000 miles of interconnected waterway. Now, why is that important? Two things. One, moving stuff from A to B is a bit of a bitch. But moving it by water is actually pretty easy. In terms of locomotion costs, it's 1/15 the cost. Once you add in everything from the taxes that go into the infrastructure, it's about 1/50th to 1/70th the cost based on where you are. The United States has 15,000 miles in one system. The rest of the world combined has 13,000 miles. So it doesn't matter if we elect a monkey, we're going to be okay, because we have this as an advantage, and it overlays the greatest chunk of arable land on the planet. We are always going to be capital rich as a result, because it's just cheaper for us to move things from A to B. Second, we are the only country on the planet that has a spatial orientation that allows us to have a major population on both trading basins. So when the Asians are in recession, we can trade with the Europeans. When the Europeans are in recession, we can trade with the Asians. When we're in recession, we export it to the world, because we're just that kind of people. That's not really a joke. Every recession we've had since 1945 has gone global. We have yet to import one. As a side effect of this.
Yeah, so when you can't talk about what you want to talk about, meaning the interests of your people, all right, you have to use proxies like abortion. That's the overall theme for tonight. Now, there's a downside in having to always talk in euphemisms, always having to talk in proxy terms, having to say lies out loud, such as, every individual of every group is just equally talented, is that when you speak lies and you write lies, you start to think in lies, right? So we're not coming to grips with this massive crime wave and traffic fatality wave and pedestrian death wave that's hitting the United States of America because we can't be specific about, which groups are suffering the most, which is the black community. All right. Blacks have had an astronomical increase in driving deaths since the George Floyd riots, as police have cut back on policing, as police have stopped back on making routine traffic stops. Then we've had an explosion of bad driving, and that has resulted in a rapid increase in black deaths. It has not resulted in a rapid increase in white deaths or Asian deaths on the road. So the people who are behaving more cautiously, they, generally speaking, are not being victimized by this rapid increase in traffic death, pedestrian death, and in crime. We've had a massive explosion in crime since George Floyd died, and we can't talk honestly about law enforcement and public education and public transportation because we can't talk honestly about how different groups have different gifts. And so Republicans have been waging a battle for their people's interest using abortion as a proxy, but now it seems that they may well have finally achieved their golden grail of reversing Roe v. Wade And the results may be absolutely disastrous for Republicans. I'm not sure. I'm not predicting that. But it's certainly possible. The conventional wisdom is that this development of the Supreme Court appearing to be on track to reverse Roe v. Wade will be very good for Democrats. That's the conventional wisdom. So maybe Republicans will be hoisted on their own petard because Republicans and conservative activists have not been able to speak for what they really want to advocate for because they have had to use euphemisms. Now they've internalized these euphemisms so that people get all emotional about abortion, for example, and think that abortion is such a critical issue. Now they get what they want, and we'll see if they get hoisted on their own petard. Laura Ingram's making a good point here. If the case for unlimited access for abortion, all right, for at least the first trimester is so widespread and so popular, then why do Democrats fear this case going to the people?
At least he admitted what was really happening, the killing of a child. Well, I know the left loves confusing people, but let's be clear about this. Overturning Roe, I'll say it slowly for you, does not mean abortion is outlawed in all 50 states, although that's what the pro-life community are hoping and praying for sure. Overturning Roe simply means, again, I'll go slowly, that voters in each state will have a say in how abortion would be regulated, if at all. Now, Roe took that decision away from the voters by making this spurious argument that abortion itself was a fundamental right protected in the 14th Amendment. And I have a question tonight. Why are pro-abortion forces so upset? Because if abortion is as popular as they claim, why they're worried about what happens next?
That's a good point.
Because if abortion is indeed popular, Democrats should be thrilled to test that theory out in all 50 states. But I'll tell you what's really going on. They do not trust the people. Because if the voters choose something...
Right. Progressivism is fundamentally about the rule of the elites. Communism is fundamentally about the rule of the elites. Left wing, the further you go left, the more and more it's about replacing the sovereignty of the people with the sovereignty of experts. So when you have left-wing parties in power, they're increasingly anti-populist. The populist believes in the wisdom and the virtue of the common person. Right? Progressives are populism's enemies. Right? Progressives, leftists, socialists, communists, they believe in rule by the elites, and they believe in the elites doing what is best for the people. And so populists can be on the left or they can be on the right. And Joe Biden has many populist tendencies. But in the Western world today, populism is much more associated with the right because leftism has become increasingly the religion, the governing ideology of the ruling class and of the elites who are inherently anti-populist. And the elites stay in power by making pragmatic alliances with various segments of society, be it the middle class, the upper class, the lower classes. The elites like a pluralist society because pluralism destroys the power of the people because the people no longer feel they have much in common. So the people become so increasingly divided into various subsections that the people cannot effectively mount a rebellion against the ruling elites and the ruling class. So you have populism and progressivism. They're opposites, right? Pluralism, progressivism, leftism, socialism, communism, these are all on the left, and they all believe in rule by experts. And then you have populism, which believes in the virtue of the people and that the people's sovereignty should dominate. And so the left, you see by their reaction to this ruling, how much they distrust the people. And I'm not a populist. I'm a populist in some things. I believe in expert rule in other things. I don't think the elites are typically more wrong than the populace or less wrong than the populace. I don't instinctively side with the populace or the elites or the experts or the ruling class or the lower classes. I just go wherever I feel like the truth is leading me. But Laura Ingram's touching on something important here.
Or someone that the left doesn't like, they'll say the system is broken. They try to rig the system then. So
right. So when the leftists and the media and academic elites say, our democracy is broken, they don't mean democracy as in the will of the people, right? If you're pro-democracy, you're pro this apparent Supreme Court ruling because it restores sovereignty to the people, right? but they stay, our democracy, not democracy, our democracy is broken. And what do they mean by our democracy? They increasingly mean rule by experts and rule by the elites rather than rule by the people. So it's our democratic institutions which are broken, institutions they feel like they can control, right? Our democratic institutions which increasingly give power to an administrative state and to a ruling class of experts who cannot be held in check by the will of the people. So the more diverse America is, the less you have a people who can effectively rebel against a ruling class, against elite class, against rule by experts.
So that conservatives never win again. Hence their incessant talk over things like court packing, you heard that tedious chant, and ending the filibuster, etc. So if they win, America still has a functioning democracy. If they lose, it's all illegitimate and a sign that democracy is on the ropes.
If Republicans win in the midterm elections, that voting as we know it in this country will be gone.
Their democracy is at risk, and if the House is taken back by the Republicans, our democracy will be stepped on again.
Yet the ironic thing is these so-called progressives, that they're the ones that have been tearing down our democratic institutions, trashing our norms and all of our procedures, literally ripping down our historical statues and monuments. No votes there. They've been doing this for years now. They allege that our systems of commerce, government, business, of course now the court, structurally racist.
So Laura Ingraham was about the first major political player who came out in serious support for Donald Trump. So she came out in support for Donald Trump in, I think, late May of 2015. And she was the first major person to do so. And she did so primarily on the issue of immigration.
They say our framers were racist. And now they want to prevent certain GOP candidates even, who they don't like, and certainly don't think like someone they'll tolerate, like Mitt Romney. They want to prevent them from even running for office at all. They believe free speech on social media is dangerous. They believe that Fox News should be outlawed. Their ideal type of government, these big pro-democracy people, their ideal type of government produces places like New York City and Chicago. Americans have begun, though, to figure it all out, haven't they? What's become of these modern Democrats? They don't want an independent media, just like they don't want an independent judiciary. And they certainly don't want many of the states to be self-governing or to set their own priorities on issues that are important to those states. Today's Democrats prefer that a small, homogeneous group of elites order the rest of us around. My friends, that is not democracy. No serious person thought that the framers wrote the 14th Amendment to just validate whatever would end up being the New York Times. And
a song from John Hinckley, We Are Drifting on the Sea.
They're as tranquil as can be. It's all these things I feel. We are drifting on the sea. All the ups and downs I had along the way, the long and mournful sounds, the hell I had to pay, but everything's alright. Everyone I know is free. The sun is shining bright. We are drifting on the sea. Everyone is here, waiting for the time. It is like the wind, looking so sublime. I am just a guy who made it through the rain. I really don't know why I overcame the pain, but now we got a chance. It's just you and me. different circumstance. We are drifting on the sea. Everyone is here, waiting for the time. It is like the wind, looking so sublime. I am just a guy who made it through the rain. I really don't know why I overcame the pain, but now we got a chance. It's just you and me, a different circumstance. We are drifting on the sea. A different circumstance. We are drifting